Hi, this is Simply Wing Chun. I just thought this morning we'd have a quick talk about the first section of Siu Nim Tao, probably the most important section that you can learn. It sets out the foundations for all the basics you're going to develop, and so I thought go through that, have a look at it a bit in detail, and raise some discussion points for you. So obviously, most important thing is always start off with Yi Ji Kim Yu Ma. When you perform Yi Ji Kim Yu Ma, you're going to bend the knees, slide the toes out, pivot on the balls of the feet, slide the heels out even further, and create this nice V shape with the feet and the knees. It's important that the knees point in the same direction as the toes. Knees do only want to bend in one direction, they do not want to be doing this and this. So by adducting the hips, turning the feet in, turning the toes in, pushing the knees in the same direction, down towards a point directly in front of you, created by a line between the centre of the heels, forward through the centre of the toes and projecting it forward, that'll give you a nice, stable, relaxed stance. Don't need to tense up the leg muscles. If you had your stance out and you dropped down and you were standing with your knees adducted outwards, you'd rely on all the muscle groups to make them nice and strong. However, if you open the basic stance correctly, tilt the hip girdle forward. By tilting the hip girdle forward, you create antagonistic dynamic tension between all the major muscle groups. It means that you don't have to constantly have to tense them, because when you try and relax and sit down, you sink your stance. It's nice and strong and it's nice and supportive and it's nice and triangulated within the muscle groups. So, Yi Ji Kim Yu Ma, bend the knees, slide the toes out, slide the heels out, adduct the hips, tilt the hip girdle forward just a little bit, pulling the pelvic floor, and that's your basic stance. Gets its name because the distance between the toes, shorter the distance between the heels, mirroring the Chinese character Yi, which is number 2, which is a short line, with a longer line underneath. From here, very simple, mark a low reference with the wrists, mark a high reference with the wrists, draw your arm back. It is not a lower Gan Sao or an upper Tan Sao or crossed hands or a block or anything like that at all. It's simply a matter of geometry. If you had an old school compass with a pencil on one end and a point on the other, and you had a line that you wanted to draw a true perpendicular bisector through, all you would do is open up the compass wider than the halfway point, put the point on one end, scribe an arc with a pencil, keep it the same, put the point at the other end, scribe the arc with a pencil, and where those two arcs cross, that will be the true perpendicular bisector, or as we call it, the centre line. When I was in Foshan, I remember in sort of 1989 watching the students practice, and because the lighting wasn't very good and power used to go on and off a little bit, I noticed that they would have a pole leant against a wall down to the floor, and on there lots and lots of tea lights, and they would have students, beginners, just stood in front of those tea lights, directly in front of the pole, just blocking out the light, blocking out the light, blocking out the light, just trying to get them to the point where they were so familiar with their centre line, their perpendicular line to themselves, because obviously with training solo, that they could just put their hands on the centre line immediately. And that's all this really references. So from here, low reference point, high reference point, relax, centre line marked. Jit Kune just comes in, relax, relax, contract, relax, open Hun Sao. Most important, do not rotate the elbow. If when you're performing Hun Sao, you rotate the elbow, what you're actually therefore doing is working the shoulder, the rotator cuff. When you're doing Hun Sao, do not rotate the elbow. You want to work all the tendons and the guides. And a lot of people suffer from RSI or carpal tunnel syndrome, repetitive strain injury used through keyboards and stuff. Very tender. You've got a band of muscles going around here and then all the guides and the tendons running through it. You want to make them strong. From a health perspective, very beneficial. And obviously Hun Sao is one of the most repeated movements in the whole of the Siu Nim Tao, Chun Kuen and Bu Ji. And the reason for that is when you hit something, you're not likely to dislocate your shoulder so much. You're not likely to injure your elbow. If you make a good fist and you learn how to make a good fist on the sabao, the wall bag, then you're making this a solid object. But the problem with the wrist, it's a complex synovial joint. It can flex in many different ways. Many people sprain their wrists just pushing themselves up off the floor because the wrist is the weaker point. So we need to strengthen it, we need to make it solid, we need to make it supportive, and that's what your Hun Sao is for. So when you're doing the Hun Sao, pull in tight, circle it very slowly against the resistance, all the way through as far as you can, not rotating the elbow, to the point where it won't go any further. At that point then relax, bring it back to a fist, relax, and there's nothing in this move, so don't put anything into it. From here, first thing we do, open the palm and bend the thumb. We bend the thumb. It's a large intestine point number 4 here, the Hoku point. It's an energy point that runs all the way up this meridian, all the way through. If you lock it out and you tighten it out and you clamp it, you stop the energy flowing. Now those are not into qigong or soft energy or all this sort of stuff, then think of it the fact that all you're doing is spacing your thumb apart, because just here there are two tendons, two little guides that support the wrist. So by bending the thumb and pulling it in so it's not sticking out so that a punch will take it out, at the same time it's not pulled in so tight that all the fingers cramp, you're just protecting it, but at the same time you're locking out these two tendons here, these two little guides that support and lock the wrist. That means that the hand can be relaxed, but the wrist is supportive and not going to collapse. So the first thing we want to do from here, open the palm, bend the thumb. The next thing we do is we drop the elbow without pushing forward. The reason we drop the elbow without pushing forward is that Tan Sao, which is effectively the technique you're going to use, albeit in Siu Nim Tao first section you pull your elbow in, or Mai Jian, pulling the elbow in to gain flexibility. So it's not quite Tan Sao, it's a Tan Sao missing an ingredient, but structurally and positionally wise, apart from the elbow, it's as good as Tan Sao. What you're trying to do is to get body cover between the elbow and the wrist. That's what defends you, that's what gives you protection. If I turn sideways, Tan Sao covers from here to here. So as it travels out, travelling out flat and then picking up at the end in Siu Nim Tao, it's like pulling up a drawbridge. It gives absolutely no body cover until it's structured, or pushing it out and then pressing down using all the wrong structure would never work in combat. It's got to go forward defensively as it travels. So we learn those skills very early on by performing the movement slow, deliberately and repetitiously. The reason for doing it very slow is that A, it means you stay in your stance a lot longer, so your legs get a much greater workout, where if you put a lot of tension in but you do it quickly, you're not rooting for as long and positioning yourself in structures in the stance as long. The second thing is we don't want to learn to put tension in for later on to learn to have to relax at certain points and take tension out. So we learn very slowly to switch off certain muscle groups like the biceps, which are contractors, use the antagonists, the triceps, which are the extenders from the point of view of pushing forward defensively or offensively. We're controlling the centre line, and obviously we don't overshoot. The reason we don't want to overshoot is that our structure gets no protection. We lose the protective line of the bones and the forearm by overextending. Very hard to overextend if you're doing it very, very slowly. That's like a snail overrunning a mark and not stopping at the point. If you're moving so slowly, you're going to stop at the right point every time. However, if you're going quickly, quite likely you're going to overshoot and you're going to lose your structure, lose your shape, lose your position. Not going to help you train. So from here, first thing we do is open the hand, bend the thumb, drop the elbow, get your forearm body cover first, push with the elbow forward and push your wrist into the centre line. Your centre line in this case being the line perpendicular to shoulders because you have no opponents. And then you get your wrist to the centre line and slowly tracking the elbow in, moving forward, 1 fist distance. That's like the optimum range. You can go further forward against a hook or a jab, but you don't want to get any closer because it will collapse. From 1 fist distance here, pull up, and again, huen sao, work it, keep the elbow in, and to the point where you can't rotate the elbow, the wrist anymore before the elbow wants to drift, start to ease off the tension, relax, lock forward. You want your fingers perpendicular, the hand's slightly angled. I do see people with a hand edge on, but when a punch comes and you're trying to use it to cover, protect, deflect, or whatever you want to use, you're not going to cover it with the edge of the hand, you're going to use the palm. And the arm is going to come in from a shoulder angle. It's not coming straight out the sternum, even in a, and I'm talking in a sort of in a sterile environment at the moment, a classroom environment. I'm not talking fighting, but even talking basic training. Basic training, you would expect the hand to be slightly angled, with your partner training with you, would have their forearm slightly angled. You would not have it edge on, too small a surface, very fine bones. Bones are only strong along their length. That's where the power is. This way, along their edges, it's going to collapse. So as we come forward to here, huen sao, relax, lock the wrist forward. There's a forwarding energy in the wrist, so you always want to keep something out. The thumb is spaced because of the pressure point here. If you're not into pressure points, if you're not into you know, thinking about meridians and chi energy, and you know, as a British northerner, it kind of goes on my head a little bit as well, I've got to admit. You know, even though I practice acupressure, I still struggle with the concept of chi energy, and it's not that I don't believe in it, I haven't found a way of explaining it to the satisfaction of myself, so I don't want to use terms that I don't fully understand. So from a point of view of here, if you struggle with chi energy and stuff like that, just think of it like this: if you learn to space your thumb apart, then when you need to, thumb in the eye. Very, very simple. You know, so whether you're thinking about offensively, defensively, energy flow, structure, just protecting the thumb. You can look at the thing from many, many different ways, but the principle is exactly the same. Bend the thumb, lock the wrist forward, angle the hand, fingers straight but not tense, don't lock them out, okay, and keep a forwarding in the forearm even though you're now going to retract. Notice my elbow is down. It's trying to give body cover to this area here. I've seen people do it like this and they obviously don't like their ribs. Okay, keep your elbow down. It can always come forward, it can always come out, it can always cut down, it can always come rolling in, but keep the elbow down to give body cover. Cut off a quadrant of the body, but when you're applying it, if you're leading with the one hand, you've got another hand here, you don't want your elbow out. If I lift my elbow up, this now comes almost parallel to my body, which means it's going to collapse. It has no forward resistance, no structure whatsoever. And B, it's just leaving a hole, waiting for Chinese spare ribs to be given to you by smacking it in and busting off the floating rib and sticking it in your lung and watching you drown. Not great. So from here, that's the structure that I've been taught to adapt. As I start to pull back, I'm pulling with the elbow, dragging as if there's a resistance holding my wrist a little bit. And I'm pulling that towards me slowly, deliberately, keeping on the centre line. And notice that the hand is slowly dropping down. It's slowly angling down. Okay, and the reason for that is this bone is fixed length. It's not telescopic. If I was to try and pull my hand horizontally, my shoulder would have to lift. It would create all sorts of unnecessary tension. Just let the pendulum action of pulling the hand back here. Let this be your pivot point. Let that elbow pendulum down slightly and draw it down. Bring it in, keep body cover, keep the wrist forward, keep the differential in height between the wrist and the elbow there, because that's what gives you body cover and protection to your one fist distance. And at that point, that's when you relax. His dog, you know, he got muscles in his sweat. He was a really powerful, well-built, well-cut individual. Stood in his basic stance, and I'm standing there, and he's training hard, and he's absolutely starting to drip. And he must have stood in his basic stance for 15 minutes on about his second lesson. And I'm like, relax, take it easy, take a break. Little bit and often is the secret to maintenance all the way through. Don't do too, I'll be fine, I'm used to hard work. Fine, okay. You know, and I kept encouraging him to relax. No, not having any of it. Anyway, he finished his first lesson. He started to go home, walking like a zombie, because obviously his legs are all locked out. He only lived about 10 miles away, and that was only about 7 months ago, so he's probably home by now, but I've never seen him since. The amount of lactic acid residue he must have had in his muscles when he woke up in the morning, because it's a very, very muscular specific training. It doesn't look a lot of hard work maintaining the basic stance. It looks like relaxed, and it's supposed to look like that. It's supposed to look easy. Gung Lik is about taking the hard tasks and making them look simple through experience and practice and repetition. But it's not. You know, I've taught a lot of professionals, athletes, etc., military. I've taught them Wing Chun, not necessarily purely basic stance and all the sort of the fundamental stuff, more practical stuff. But in amongst that, I've had them doing this stance just to make them understand it. And after about 5-10 minutes, no matter how fit they are, because it's so muscular specific, their legs are starting to shake, their legs go into spasm, and as they go into spasm, you get these little help messages running around the body going, you are really embarrassing me, come on, build me up and get me better. And that's its purpose. So, Siu Nim Tao, the little idea is to focus. Focus on what you do, decrease all those little, you know, concerns of the world that cause us so much stress, and for just the performance of the form, focus on what that is all about. If you don't plant a seed on fertile ground, it's never going to grow. You might have the best quality seeds on the planet, but you drop them on concrete in the sun, they're going to die. It needs a receptive area, and that's your receptive area. Okay, so Siu is small or decreasing or little, Nim is a thought or an idea, and Tao or Tao is a methodology. So you can translate it how you like. The little idea being to focus on training and nothing else. The little idea is to put things out of the way. Or the little idea is to take the core seeds of the training, plant them in a fertile mind, learn them, understand them, develop them, nurture them and grow them, and be patient. You know, you don't plant a seed and as soon as a little green shoot comes out the top, you start pulling it to make it grow faster. You give it water, you give it light, you give it the nutrients and the time that it needs to develop and grow itself. And if you can do that with your training, it's there forever. You know, whether you're 21 years old or 91, 92, 93, some like my teacher is, and some of the Wing Chun masters around the world, they're getting older, but they're not losing it. Their Wing Chun is changing. It's less fight-oriented and more health-oriented. Nevertheless, it stands them in good stead. And if you can benefit from that, you've got Wing Chun for the rest of your life. So Siu Nim Tao, first section, it's your foundation, it's your fundamental, it's your gung lick, it's your developing a skill that you're going to train and train and train to the point it becomes second nature, and it's developing your elbow energy, which will stand you in good stead later on for application, both in Chi Sao, fighting, drilling, or any other application that you require. So, Siu Nim Tao, very small, very simple, very deep. Thank you.